Welcome to the Odd Times. This is the inaugural episode we have decided to call Welcome to the Odd Times.
Makes sense.
I am Nick.
I'm Clara.
And I'm Tat.
And Tat.
And today I'm going to be talking about a song that I learned recently on the ukulele called Tom Dooley. Let's see if I can do this. Don't all come down at once. Thank you. I'm a proudly mediocre musician. Lately because it only has 2 chords, and it's really easy to play. And my mom looked it up for some reason, and discovered that it is based on a true story. Actually, this very simple song has quite a backstory.
Pentangle.
Tom Dooley and the love something of the century. You'll notice his name is spelled B-U-L-A. This is the Appalachian pronunciation, is Dooley. It's the same accent that gave us the Grand Ole Opry, and for the same reason.
Oh, makes sense.
So,
As much as that makes sense.
Dooley was born June 22nd, 1845, and was hanged on May 1st, 1868. The song was written shortly after his hanging by a poet named Thomas Land. He passed it. It got complicated after that. Most people know the song because of the Kingston Trio. They had a hit version in the 50s. I think it was 58. Yes. They apparently learned it from somebody named Frank Warner, who learned it from somebody named Frank Prophet, who learned it from his aunt, whose parents knew both Tom and that woman he killed.
Wow.
Damn.
Well, this happened in 1866 in Wilkes County, North Carolina, which was pretty far from Flint at the time, I understand. Pentagon didn't sound right. Sounds weird too, but the love Pentagon of the century just didn't work. So that's
when you get to penta, it's definitely a tangle. So I think it works pretty well. God.
So let me introduce you to our players. First, this is Tom Dooley.
Oh, wow.
Photo of.
He was
his Civil War enlistment photo.
Yeah.
I'll put him right in the middle. Okay. He grew up alongside the Foster family, and at some point, him and Anne Foster became lovers. There are several stories on this. One said her mother caught them in bed together when she was 14 and he was 12.
Whoa.
Um, But we do know that when she was 13, in what year was it? 1859, she married a local farmer named James Melton, who was significantly older than her.
Side note, Tad, I love the artist's renderings.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
great.
thank you.
Yes.
They continued to be lovers. One story said that he knew about it the whole time. They all lived in his house, and he was kind of done with her.
Mm.
So he's like, fine, you sleep with Tom. That's cool.
Wow.
Who knows? But she had two so they're lovers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're married, but possibly not lovers. One of her cousins was Pauline Faulkner. And her other cousin was Laura Faulkner. Now, at some point, we know he started sleeping with her.
Wow.
The same account that said knew about it the whole time said they were all living together. She moved in, and these two were lovers, which I totally forgot to draw in my thing. And these two were lovers as well.
Wow.
And
Had a
cousins.
happy threesome going on. And then at some point, I don't know. They may know. I don't know whether these two are sisters or cousins. They're both
Wow.
her cousin.
Right.
But we don't know if they're cousins of each other or sisters of each other.
Oh my
But at
God.
some point, unbeknownst to this entire triangle, he started sleeping with her
Wow.
on the side. And she shortly got pregnant.
Oh.
And according to her, they were going to get married. They were going to elope. So at some
Jeez.
point, she told a neighbor this, and she packed up a horse, and she left her dad's farm at the break of dawn and was never seen again. Tom was accused of the murder before they found her body or anything. And the only other person named in the song is Grayson.
Right.
Grayson is pretty much nobody in this story, ironically. He's way over here. And even this, escape and capture, makes it sound like a bigger deal than it was. When he was on run, he went by Tom Hill and worked for Grayson for a week as a
Okay.
farmer. And then he took off again, and when Grayson found out who he really was, he helped bring him back in.
Hmm.
So we don't know why he got second billing in the song. So then we get into theory. This is how it all was when the murder happened. There are a lot of theories about what happened. A lot of people think Tom never actually did it. In fact, a lot of the evidence points to Anne. So one of the evidence against him is he was heard around town saying that he was going to go after the person who gave him the pox, syphilis.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of people thought that was Laura, but a doctor testified that he had treated all of these people for syphilis. But the first to be treated was Pauline.
Hmm.
So most likely, she gave it to Tom, and he gave it to both of them.
Wow.
These two are the ones that found the body. Like, it was her testimony that led them to Laura's body.
Mm-hmm.
And Pauline testified that she had taken Pauline to the grave at some point to make sure it was still hidden.
I feel like.
Yeah.
What? I mean, I feel like Anne Foster Melton may have done this.
Yes.
That's my brain is putting this together. I don't really have a specific reason for that, except obviously she did.
Kind of suspicious.
Well,
and that's
maybe.
wonderful.
Yeah, look at that little smile.
You
no,
think
but
she did it
she
too.
did lead Pauline to the body. She is
Mhm.
the first of the
Lovers.
the lovers, and would be the gatekeeper, kind of in that relationship. She probably let her cousin Pauline in. Like, it all makes sense for some reason in that way. And then for Laura to be like, oh, we're gonna get engaged,
And I'm pregnant.
and I'm taking
And
like,
they thought maybe she killed her out of jealousy
Yeah.
because they were going to get married. But we only have what she told the neighbor to know that he even agreed to marry her.
Right.
He
Yeah.
was a known libertine or womanizer, but considering that this was the arrangement he lived with, I'm kind of understanding why.
Yeah.
yeah.
There are a bunch of myths now about what happened at his execution. One story says that he wrote this song and sat on top of a barrel in the back of the execution wagon playing the banjo and singing at the top of his lungs as he rode to his hanging. I'm
Wow.
pretty sure that one's just a legend.
Probably.
One more accepted fact is that he stood on the block and said these hands never touched a hair on her head, but that he also said he deserved to be hung anyway, hanged. He apparently wrote a 11-page document like explaining his life and exonerating him, which was unusual for his education level, that he was literate enough to do that. Local legends in the area, she either died in a carriage accident or she went insane, or there's like 4 versions of her death. And one thing they said is that at the end she saw black cats everywhere and like heard weird noises in her house. Like, of course, she did have syphilis, so she was probably insane.
Yeah, she was going crazy. Yeah.
And I never heard what happened to Laura. Oh, well, we know what happened to Laura. I never heard what happened to Pauline.
Yeah. Huh. That's insane.
That is. I mean, I think, you know, the going insane from syphilis in kind of, I don't know, I feel like
apropos if she did murder her cousin.
I mean, like, yeah, you know, people with syphilis can sometimes hold it together for a long time, and just, I don't know, like, for it to be a guilt-ridden sort, I can totally see it, like, this guilt-ridden person just, like, slowly going insane with this disease racking their body.
I'm with you. I think she was absolutely involved somehow.
Yeah, there's just too much there. She led Pauline to the body. She led investigators to the body. Like, you don't usually see that.
And Laura was found with a single stab wound to the chest and her legs drawn up to fit in a small grave. I think that's all the forensic details that we have.
Right. I mean, yeah. I don't know why he would necessarily
what motive?
Kill her. Like, if he's living with 3 women, essentially, one of whom is married, all of whom are related in some fashion, I don't know that he would... I don't know if they were to, like, say they were actually getting married, and it wasn't just something she said because she was pregnant, like, I don't know why that would change the arrangement at all. So I don't know why he... Yeah, and even if she had a baby, like...
jealous one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if she had gotten all possessive, like, oh, now we're going to have a baby and get married, so this is all ending,
well,
then that might be a thing.
Yeah, and, like, I can see Tom maybe like, oh, you should join our weird, like, group of, like, fuck buddies, and, you know, like, totally trying to swing that, and her not digging it, of course, because...
Well, she must have known about that to begin with,
Do you think so?
You would think, I mean, who knows?
I mean, yeah, there's no telling what they were trying to portray. I don't think that was okay even back then.
Okay enough that apparently Anne's husband was like, whatever.
That's a good point.
It could have been something that was kept in the family. Like,
yeah,
her husband being okay with it and the neighbors knowing about it may have been different things.
True.
Right.
True.
Or the neighbors knowing about it for sure, at least, because I'm sure there were suspicions.
Oh, well, if there was already gossip about him and Anne being found together when they were like 12 and 14, then there, I'm sure, was some like, oh my gosh, they're living together.
So when he went off to war, he was in the same unit as James Melton.
Wow.
And they both got captured by the North and were kept in the same prison for like a year before they were released. And when they came back, all of this resumed as it had been, essentially. I'm not sure if Laura was in the picture yet or not.
Wow.
Just out of curiosity, what side did they fight for? That looks like a Confederate.
Yeah, they were Confederate.
Yeah.
It's
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were all Confederate. So was Colonel James Grayson, I believe. So he was in Tennessee. That's why the song says that. He was just across the river in Tennessee, which is why Tom went to go hide with him.
Right, he tried to escape.
Right.
There's at least one other country song I can think of that's about a prison break. And they mention, like, heading south to Tennessee. Apparently that's just where you went to escape the law back in the day.
I can definitely see that. There's some places, like, Yeah, I've been there.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. Like, some of the terrain is just so dense with forests and stuff. You can vanish within 10 feet of the road.
This was something that I had not understood before. So I was looking at pictures of the Appalachian Mountains, and like from a Westerner point of view, they're not even mountains. Like they are rolling hills.
They used to be. They used to be mountains.
Yeah. And growing up in like California, I never understood why this area was so isolated, because the mountains weren't that rugged, and I did not understand what the underbrush would be like. Having lived in Seattle now for 10 years or close to it, I'm like, yeah, no, it doesn't have to be really steep mountains for that to be like completely impassable for a large portion of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of it is limestone and worn down, and you've got, you know, pretty crazy rivers, you know, going through there. You've got Mount Washington not too far from there. That place gets swept with winds so hard it's knocked people off of the mountain itself to their deaths.
Yeah.
You know, it's not exactly a hospitable place. And then, yeah, the underbrush is so thick that it really, not everywhere, but like especially when you get younger trees that are just they grow so densely, it would be easy to get lost and difficult to proceed. And I can see a number of cases where it would be just, you know, based on the vegetation alone.
And I get the feeling that each one of those little valleys was kind of a isolated little world for a large portion of the time.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Definitely, and I actually went there not too long ago and went to Cades Cove, and so I saw some bears, but the valley itself was really out of the way, very remote and very isolated with, I would say, not cliffs, but like fairly steep terrain on every side, probably just guessing like 300 or 400 feet above the valley floor. Like, not too big, but I mean, I don't know, the way it's eroded, a lot of that, you get this, it's kind of a mess, and you get a lot of weird limestone, you know, cutouts and protrusions. It's just hard terrain.
Well, and more than that too, I think Tennessee's has like Appalachian peoples in like smaller, almost like tribe type of thing, especially back in the day, who would not turn a stranger over to the law. They'd be like, you know, we're not part of that. And
almost certainly.
Yeah,
I mean,
as long as they didn't have any reason to believe that you were one of the warring clans, one of the clans they were warring with, feuding with.
Right, yeah.
But even then, they probably wouldn't turn you over to the law. They'd just kill you.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I don't know much about that era, but I would think, you know, especially with, well, just knowing about the legend of NASCAR, you know, coming out of rum running in Tennessee, I just very much doubt those people having enough respect for law to be like, oh yeah, here you go.
Tennessee has a long history.
So apparently when Grayson found out what happened, he did.
Well, that's true.
That's a colonel a long time ago. I don't know about that, but we're talking about rum runners. I think they're more likely to be like,
just keep moving.
You give us a little scratch and we'll let you out of here. Like,
or just move along. We don't want the law.
Yeah, like, you want to buy some rum?
Well, I don't know about that, but,
you know.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why there unless there's some secret thing. I don't know why he would necessarily kill her unless she was like, I'm not having this love triangle thing, or we need to leave now. But the thing is,
he thought she had given him syphilis. But even that seems like
that's
so. If they
petty.
if they all had it anyway,
yeah,
it's not like
they're just passing it amongst each other at that point,
right? And I don't know. I feel like that back in the because this is like a long time ago, right? Like 1800s.
1866.
Yeah, like middle to 1800s. I feel like at that time,
just after the Civil War.
Yeah. At that time, I feel like if he was like, "No, we're not getting married," her being pregnant would in that day and age would have been her problem.
Yeah.
He could have been like, "That's not mine. I don't know what you're talking about. We're not getting married. Bye." And it's not like he'd be the one with pressure on him. So
Right.
that in and of itself, I don't think would be a reason to kill her. But
Unless her cousins and or sisters were pressuring him, but that throws out the whole rest of the reason he would have to kill her.
yeah, well,
The whole thing is just weird though, because you would think both of those women would be somewhat okay with the idea of this third party, maybe coming in, or this
think.
fourth party, but
Oh,
but who knows? With jealousy in the mix, and
Well, they were all related. Maybe they didn't like Laura from Children.
yeah, there's no
yeah.
telling about that. But I can't see, like, unless Laura was one of the worst people in the world, I cannot see any, like Pauline, I cannot see her being okay, like, with Anne taking out Laura, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's
Unless it
very
was conspiracy.
between the two of them.
Maybe.
Or, I mean, it's just very strange that
It is.
any of those people would be interested in killing Laura, right?
Yeah.
Even if, Tom Dooley was upset, or Tom Dooley, I keep reading it. Even if Tom Dooley was upset that Laura Foster was leaving, she couldn't really do anything to any of them. And,
right. She was kind of the powerless one.
Yeah, and frankly, the way she was found with one stab wound isn't indicative of any kind of anger or anything like that. It's just,
Taking her out.
Yeah. So where was the stab wound? Was she stabbed in the back or in the front?
In the chest.
In the
So that
chest.
implied the front.
Right. It's so
It's such a weird way to kill someone too.
Yeah, one stab wound.
And to the chest feels like personal. One to the chest feels like personal, like almost a cold anger. I feel like because you have to be looking that person in the face.
Right. The only thing that might happen was
maybe
it could have been a fit of rage.
But
if knives were handy, like hitting someone in the chest could be, I'm lashing out. Oh shit, another death.
Like an unintentional. I'm just mad, so I stab once, and then I'm like, oh shit, what did I do?
Right.
So there's not more stab wounds. It's not like a crime of passion as much as a, fit of rage, kind of accidental. Oh shit.
I don't know. Yeah. That strikes me as a stretch, just because when you find a rage motivated attack, you don't see a single wound. You don't see any second guessing of the rage. You see total attack, scorched earth, like multiple stab wounds. Dozens of stab wounds.
Of course, this is also assuming some knowledge of. I mean, people saw life and death a lot differently then, to some degree, especially young people who had just been at war, and who were possibly involved in blood feuds, because that area is somewhat known for them.
Right.
I mean, think about Game of Thrones. They're like killing people on accident all the time, and on purpose, but like it's just not a big thing.
Right.
Did you watch the most recent episode?
No.
Okay, we're not going to talk about it anyway, because no spoilers. But things happened. They sure did.
I missed what episode?
Game of Thrones.
Oh.
Yeah.
No,
we're not going to talk about
it. No spoilers.
No.
Not right.
No. Go watch that show. If you have access to it, go watch it.
If you like fantasy and are okay with violence.
I mean, it's really
fantastical.
Yeah. Be aware. Hi to kids.
I don't know. Not an inappropriate meme for that show, but
no.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you can have a crime of anger with a single stab wound. I know a lot of times when there are multiple stab wounds, that of itself is indicative of anger, but I don't think that's the only kind of angry attack is multiple wounds.
I don't think it is.
If you see 17 stab wounds, you can say that person was mad. But just because there's only one, you can't say, well, that person was not mad at all. So I think it could have been, like I'm so frustrated. God, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that. Or, even just I'm mad stab.
Right. Wait, I wasn't supposed to kill her. I was supposed to hurt her.
Right, yeah. Well, do we know how pregnant she was at the time?
No, I couldn't find any information on that. I got the sense it wasn't very
Right.
Because her legs were up to her chest to get the grave. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and if she wasn't very, she could not have been at all, and it could have just been a pressuring him thing. I hate to go there with it, but back in the day, it could have been if she wanted to marry him and didn't want him to be with the other girls. If that kind of thing happened, then it could have been like, oh, well, he needs to marry me because I'm pregnant now.
There's got to be some motive there. I mean, I'm thinking, like, it must, like, there's a missing piece here, and that piece is what the neighbors would have thought. And I'm wondering if that would have been a strong enough motivation for one of the three, because I'm not really putting, what's his face with the beard? James. I'm not throwing him in there with them as much.
Well, I mean, based on that one story, he knew about all this.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if she was cheating on him, why would he kill his wife's lover? Like,
Yeah.
Guys, go.
Yeah, which is why he's out of the equation.
Yeah, well, essentially, if they were fought in war together and they were POW camp, I mean, if you fight side by
Yeah,
side with someone, you
probably
have a chance
more
to.
of a bond.
Well, you have a chance to kill them if you wanted, and have no one suspect it. Like, oh, he totally got shot during the battle, you guys. Like, he obviously didn't care. And it's not like his wife was the one who was pregnant, or like, I'm gonna run away with Tom now. So I don't think he would have cared at all.
What I was suggesting or what I was leading up to was I think it could have been Tom Dooley doing it out of, or Dooley, damn it, doing it out of duty, having been besieged by the pleading and Foster Melton.
Oh, like she talked him into it.
Or just said this needs to happen because, you know, such and such, the blowback is going to be so bad from this jealous person running amok and
She's
telling
gonna
our
make
story.
trouble for us in our situation.
Yeah, like I wonder if that could be an acceptable motive, or like not acceptable, of course, but like a motive. Yeah, it's just so weird because I don't get the sense that there's a motive on anyone's part.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like a thing like this, you'd naturally assume jealousy, right?
They didn't have.
No one ever brought up outsiders as a possibility.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
See, outsiders seem a definitive possibility, but like strange still for it to be one stab.
Well, and okay, but they found her in a grave, right?
Right.
I don't see a random attacker being like, I'm gonna kill you, and then like bother to bury you. I feel like they would just be like, you're in a river now, or in the woods.
Well, and even if they had, how would Anne know where it was?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That is absolutely the case.
Yeah. I feel like if none of them were involved, how would she have known?
I'm sure a random outsider in the history of murder has buried someone just for the fact that if they weren't found in that time, it might be suspected that they were doing something else, and then that person could like leave town before.
I get the feeling that was a more modern thing though, because if she was just on the mountainside in the 1860s, that person would be long gone before anybody found them.
Yeah, before they even thought to look for them in any remote place.
Like
population density
you
wasn't.
Bury that body to give yourself some time to get out of town. But back then, you weren't even in a town. Nobody even knew you were there.
Yeah. Right. You can just like ride the rails on out of there, and then no one's the wiser.
Right.
Apparently.
So another interesting fact about this: the person who his lawyer was the active governor of North Carolina, who was named Zebulon Vance, and he represented him pro bono.
Oh, wow.
He, to the end of his life, maintained that Tom Dooley was innocent. But it did bring up a bunch of rumors that somehow Tom owed him favors or something, and that's why he was doing it. But Vance said he just didn't think Tom Dooley had done it.
Wow.
But he got represented free by the governor.
Wow.
Then they got the trial moved to Statesville, which was a county over, or a city over. Anyway, they didn't think he could get a fair trial in Wilkes County.
Yeah.
But he was found guilty, and when he was given a new trial on appeal, he was convicted again.
Wow.
He had a supposed accomplice, Jack Keaton, who I've not heard mentioned anywhere else in any of this. And on Dooley's word, Ann Melton was acquitted.
Wow.
So they said one theory is that Ann did it, and he loved her enough to cover for it and take the hanging.
Yeah.
I actually have not heard a theory that explains why she would know about the grave and stuff if she didn't do it.
Right.
Right.
And it makes, well, okay, I think it makes sense that people wouldn't believe she did it and assume it was him.
Yeah.
And because if you look at even cases that were a little bit later, like Lizzie Borden, she wasn't found guilty largely because people just didn't believe a woman could kill a relative, especially, but anyone.
Right, that's true, especially in a violent way instead of poison or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so if they automatically were like, well, it's got to be Tom because, you know, none of these other women could do it. James has nothing to do with her. And the only person at that point who could bring her under suspicion would be Tom. If he was like, no, it wasn't me, then who else does that leave?
Right.
Yeah, and so I think it could have totally been her. And then when they were like, well, it couldn't have been this lady. It must be this guy.
Especially not a proper married lady.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, why would she
Outstanding.
kill her own cousin?
Yeah.
Right.
And especially if the affair between her and Tom wasn't well known, she may not have been suspected at all, and he may not have wanted to not only... Well, him saying it wasn't me could not only have brought her under suspicion for murder, but also for being unfaithful to her husband, which at the time
Was probably bigger.
could have ruined her life, just the implication of her stepping out on her husband.
Right.
So he could have also been doing it not just so that she wasn't convicted of murder, but so she could, you know, not be besmirched.
Right.
It's safe to say too, if besmirching is at all in the lexicon, you know, back in the day, if that was how they operated, then yeah, it's a pretty big motive to not have your weird love triangle like kind of
So apparently
exposed.
it was all over the papers.
Oh, so everyone at that point
Very
was like,
lurid.
"Yeah."
I mean, yeah, I always
But that
kind of
was during the
assumed.
trial.
Oh.
Oh,
So
well,
at that
makes
point, it
sense,
may have
too.
been, yeah.
I always kind of assumed from like the Hollywood portrayals that Western ideology, for lack of a better term, sensibilities maybe, was somewhat Victorian. And sort of prim and proper, and you know, you don't do things, you do certain things, you have chivalry, you know, you respect.
I'm not
Right.
sure how much of that applied in the Appalachians, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. God knows.
Well, another possibility that could be, I don't know, more out there is maybe Pauline was jealous as the other not married woman
Yeah.
in his life. Maybe she was like, well, why is this third person suddenly?
And then she would have good reason to testify that Anne led her to the grave.
Yeah, then she would have perfect motive to be like, oh my gosh, Anne totally told me where it was, so that way it shifts the suspicion back onto her. Like, I would believe that too. Like, because yeah, especially if she was his first first unmarried lover who could actually marry him. And then this third lady's coming in being like, I'm the new thing and I'm pregnant and we're getting married, y'all. Then she could be like, what the hell? Who do you think you are?
Right.
Coming in here.
Okay,
I'm
so
the first in line to be his wife and all that, if she cared.
Yeah.
this is the source that had the farmer, Mr. Melton, knew about it and everything. So I don't know how accurate this source is, though that makes more sense than the tiny little community up in a valley and Mr. Melton never had a clue about any of this. Like, that seems less likely.
How could he not know? Like, another man's living in your house, sleeping with the 3 ladies that live there. If you don't know, you're just not paying any attention to anything happening in your house at all.
What if Mr. Melton was like, God damn it, not one more, and then just like
he's like, that's
Any more SU to this house?
like that's the line.
that's the line,
So
Tom
this
Dooley.
day, about the same time, Pauline Foster also visited Tennessee, and when she returned to Wilkes County, a friend jokingly inquired if she had left because she'd killed Laura Foster. Pauline Foster, also seemingly in jest, replied that she and Tom Dooley had killed Laura together. Pauline was soon arrested and charged as an accessory to murder.
Wow.
That
So I
didn't
don't
sound
know.
like a
There's
joke.
got to be records of who was actually charged in this case, but I wouldn't know where to find them, honestly.
Right.
What if all 3 of them just decided to take her out?
They're just like, we're tired of her antics.
Yeah.
It
Stamp.
says, fearing for her life, Pauline told everything she knew. Dooley and Ann Melton had killed Laura Foster together. She led them to the Laura Foster's shallow grave in the woods.
Mhm.
And this whole time, all I can think of is who killed Laura Palmer. I mean, Foster.
Right. It's a mystery.
Oh.
Maybe that other James Grayson guy is like
The evil one.
having weird dreams. and
Twitch vests with curtains involved and
And I love
strange
this
Talking
part.
about
neocortex plants.
And it says, the Yadkin Valley region was painted as a decadent bastion of free love.
Oh, wow. They're just really ahead of their times,
Yeah.
okay?
Right? They're just 100 years ahead, yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. I mean, I don't know. On the one hand, I think Anne had the most motive, and on the other hand, I think she had the least. Like, if Tom and her were together before and after she got married,
Right.
and she was cool with him sleeping with her cousin, and
Oh.
Because she
another
thought-
cousin.
That's it.
Yeah, and then her and Pauline may have been, like, also hooking up. I don't know why she would have cared. She would have been, I feel like, secure in her position
Yeah.
as, like...
I thought of an angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Attaching to that, dovetailing. Yeah, Pauline kind of does have a motive if she wanted to marry Tom Dooley,
Mhm.
so they could have this both like mutually beneficial or mutually stable, like symmetrical thing going on, right?
Right.
So with
So that
Laura,
Yeah.
yeah, so Anne Foster Melton would be married to James Melton, and then Pauline Foster could be married to Tom Dooley, and then they could just sort of do their thing.
Yes.
Well, and
Yeah.
then she wouldn't be an unmarried woman forever,
Right.
living with her
Yeah.
cousin.
Right.
It
And I
would,
think the other thing that we're not necessarily taking into consideration is just interpersonal conflict. Like,
Maybe
Laura
they did hate her.
every morning.
Maybe she
And it
what?
drove everybody nuts.
maybe
maybe
she what?
Like, drank all the milk every morning.
Oh,
Maybe she was just like a shitty housemate.
I mean, yeah. I mean, in
And like,
honest,
we hate her. Oh my god, make her stop.
yeah. I mean, it could have been because if none of them were really jealous at all or cared,
I feel like that's
why
something
would that have?
you talk to someone about first, right? Like,
You'd
that's-
think, but
Obviously,
maybe
you have not had all the same housemates I have.
not. Right?
Fair point.
She never does her dishes. I hate her.
I've talked to her about it so many times.
She's
Oh, here's another possible last words, because there's like 3 or 4 stories about what his last words were, including I've never touched a hair on her head, but I deserve to die anyways. And these says his last words were apparently, "You have such a nice clean rope, I ought to have washed my neck."
Ha.
just being a
Way to
like
go, Tom
smug
Dooley.
a-hole until the end. That's funny.
It's somewhat believable too. The guy was probably, pretty dirty at that point.
Yeah, I don't think prisons were the most hygienic of places.
No, and
Hygienic?
baths weren't very common.
No.
No,
Yeah,
carrying
wow.
wasn't that common.
And I mean, I guess a lot of folk songs are about really, like, macabre, like, topics, but
Yeah.
I can see,
yeah.
like, why this would have been probably super popular back in the day as far as gossip and newspaper goes. I
Yeah.
can see why it could have been popular enough for a song to spring up. It's crazy that the Kingsmen later were like, you know what we're gonna do? This song with this super morbid lyrics that's totally okay with everybody apparently.
Apparently, they did love telling people the true story behind the song, behind backstage and stuff.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Jeez.
These kinds of stories are sad as they are. If you don't dwell on it, they're just fun to tell.
They're
Yeah.
fascinating.
They are fascinating, and I think they reveal a lot about the who people are, not necessarily individuals, but who are different archetypes, different I don't know.
And this one, I thought about this because I know Clara had mentioned that when you deal with true crime, there are some issues of respect and how you approach the topic. And I thought about, like, no, this is just too damn good a story. Because, yes, this is a true story. Part of this is true. We don't actually know much of the true story. And also, I kind of feel like if you had a top 10 pop song about you in the 50s, then it's probably okay to talk about it however you want after that.
Yeah, I think so. Well, yeah, I mean,
Probably.
And yeah, who knows at this point? It's so long ago. Who knows how much of this was sensationalized by the papers or changed over time, or you know, any
Become,
number
like,
of things.
myth.
Yeah, at a point, I think at a point, a true crime thing can move into the like folklore, urban legend almost,
Yeah.
like domain. Especially if then there's a song about it, and that gets tweaked over time. Like, who knows how much of any of this is true, you know, really at this point. Besides what you can verify, like, oh, this was in an old newspaper, then...
Right. But then you can just verify that somebody at the time said it, not that it was actually true.
Right.
It is so personal, though. I mean, like, you know, there have been nursery rhymes and legends arising from other, you know, super catastrophic things like Ring Around the Rosie with,
that's a good
with the
example.
1918 flu. Like, kids still sing that. I'm pretty sure they do. I did when I was a kid, like...
Yep.
And, you know, it's not really thought of in the same way, but I think that's largely due to the personal nature of true crime, you know. It's... These people have identities and families that still persist, and...
Exactly.
You know,
this still impacts real people right now, whereas this doesn't as much.
Right.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'd be really, I don't know, curious. There just feels like there's so many details you just can't have, and it's like, when did this happen? What time frame? How? And you just don't know.
There are some people who've done a really good job at actually trying to track down the real story as much as they can. It would be fascinating to go read their stuff in more detail to find out what records actually exist, what is confirmed, and what isn't, and see if we can actually figure out what happened.
It sounds like a good follow-up, too.
That'd be fascinating to find a book about
more.
it and, like, learn more. That'd be really cool. Because, that's so interesting. I think just the fact that a love triangle with another married person, like, married guy who's just like, I don't care, whatever. Like that for that time especially is fascinating.
His 13-year-old wife.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? It could have been anything. How old was he? Do we know?
They
apparently,
older.
Much older.
Right.
But at the time that he died, Tom was 22.
From that picture,
wow.
James Melton
That's
looks
really
maybe like 50.
So they've been lovers for a decade. I'm not sure when Pauline came into the picture.
Right.
Wow, he's only 22. That's a trip and a half. And already been through a war at a POW, and...
Yeah.
People grew up real fast back in the day.
They still do.
Yeah, exactly.
They still do.
Yeah, that's why I was a little less shocked to see their ages. Like...
Yeah.
12 and 14 is really young, but people didn't... That was hard life then. Especially up where they were.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder if maybe if her marriage to James was never a love marriage and never expected to be real.
It could be. What happened in my head is that he was gay and she was weird. Like, I gotta marry somebody. Yeah,
well, especially if there's rumors of, like, her parents catching her in bed with a man already. It could have been you need to get married.
That I can't figure out because those were in separate accounts.
Mm.
And the dates don't line up because that said that her mother caught Anne and Tom in bed when he was 12 and she was 14, but she got married at 13.
Oh.
Because she got married in 1859, and if she was 2 years older than Tom, he was born in 45. So she would have been born in 43.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do the math. That's too hard.
Well,
43 to 66?
To 59. 1859 is when she got married.
So 16?
16, yeah.
So 60. So that's not 13. That's 16.
Yeah.
So that was after she got caught in bed with Tom.
So yeah, maybe it was kind of like you need to get married, and if he was an older man who, for whatever reason, just kind of needed a wife to keep house and that kind of thing, and she just needed a marriage so her reputation was intact and her parents were happy. And so she'd leave her parents' house. Because I really doubt her parents would have been chill with her having, like, a lover and her cousins being there and also being with them. You know? It could have been a convenience thing for them.
Together, it was very clearly at his house that was happening.
Oh, okay.
That account.
Right.
He had
And
to be
that's where
okay
the
with
problem
it.
comes in, is you got different stories from different people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just been convenience. He didn't care, and
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like out of everyone, she had the most secure position. So I don't know
Why she would have.
yeah, like if it was her, it had to have just been a purely emotional, like I don't know, I'm upset with you kind of thing,
Right.
because
I
I
mean,
don't.
it's also possible that Tom liked them all, but was actually falling in love with Laura.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he could have been with her for like more than Anne, since Anne started
Right.
married.
And the account did imply that this was totally on the spot. Like, they all knew about each other.
Right. Oh,
Cheating with Laura.
interesting.
Right. I guess I'd assumed that. But
I hadn't, but yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But that would make it even more weird that he'd kill her. If he was seeing her
yeah.
secretly, why would he have killed her, and why would Anne have known about it? He's not going to be like, oh, by the way, baby, I was totally seeing this other girl and got her pregnant, and then I killed her and I buried her here. I'm glad you know all that now when you didn't before.
Don't you love me?
Better to get that off my chest.
Yeah, like I feel like if their relationship was secret, he would have kept the murder secret because he wanted to keep the relationship secret.
Right.
So I feel like Anne would have had to have been involved, if not the person who did it. If all of those things are true.
Right.
My personal opinion is
right.
that would make the most sense. Because, yeah, I can't see him murdering his secret lover and then telling his not a secret lover
Right.
about it.
I agree with that.
And then if Pauline's freaked out by the whole thing, because then she's like, what? He was seeing my sister and then killed, what? And then what? Are you showing me her grave? Why? Like, that could have been Anne, like, power tripping. Like,
That could have been.
don't step to me. Look what I did.
Watch, we're gonna
Dead.
We're gonna see this as a like Hollywood movie in a few years, just using one of these permutations of this story that we've already talked
yeah.
about.
This could be like 12 different Lifetime movies, just the different possible scenarios.
Ooh,
I
my
know
bad.
there
It's okay.
was a movie, The Legend of Tom Dooley. It came out in, I can't tell what year, 59, so a year after the song.
Wow.
And it says,
Jeez.
in the movie, Dooley's crime was killing a Union soldier while unaware that the war had already ended.
That makes
What?
total sense for the 50s.
Yeah, so they
Right,
didn't
but it
even...
has nothing to do with the original story at
No,
all.
no.
They were
nothing.
just like, we like the idea of someone named Tom Dooley being on trial for murder.
Well, to be fair, the Kingston Trio song is not super specific on the details, and Laura Foster is never mentioned by name.
True, but you'd look it up if you were making a movie, I think. But maybe you
You would
wouldn't.
think, but the people watching the movies back then couldn't look it up.
True.
So the movie people could do whatever the hell they wanted.
And then people would just be like, oh, that's what the song's about.
Exactly.
And the Kingsmen are just like, no.
Wow.
That's really crazy.
Just-
I've heard that song before. I don't think I only remember the chorus though, so I don't know if I've ever actually heard the story
verses.
bits of it, but
Yeah.
that's pretty crazy.
Isn't that an unexpected story for
Right?
a very simple song?
That's really trippy.
Yeah.
So curious now. I may have to go look up find an audiobook or something.
You know, at my local library, they have a novel
Oh.
Really?
that is apparently a retelling
Do you,
of the story of Tom Dooley.
do you remember the name of that?
I'd have to look it up. Yeah, I think. By the way, the novel is The Ballad of Tom Dooley by Sharon Crumb. And the movie, they actually have the poster on this website, and the kid was a rebel, but they couldn't hang his soul.
Wow, melodrama.
I
Out
mean,
of that song and story, a fury of a movie. What does that even mean?
What is it?
It says, out of that song and story, a fury of a movie.
a
A
fury?
fury of a movie?
Fury, like anger. F-U-R-Y.
Yeah. What does that mean? A fury.
I don't know.
Welcome back to the Odd Times. Interesting topics and random opinions. This is our inaugural episode, and it is called, or issue, and it is called Welcome to the Odd Times. And here we are. Oh, you know what? You should be maximized.
Yes,
Max
maximum
tab.
tad.
All right. So, we learned all about Tom Dooley and the weird ass pentrangle. What did we call it?
Pentrangle.
The love pentangle.
The love
Yes.
pentangle.
Pentangle is a
century.
great word.
And that was extremely interesting and definitely bizarre. And I'm sure for the time. Ooh, let's get that out of there. It's my camera settings.
Behind the scenes.
I don't know why that popped out there like that. Anyway, yeah, for the times, I think even that one would have been strange, and that seems to be, like, in thinking about it, just the most plausible motive. But I don't want to rehash, even though I just did. I'm sorry.
It's a recap.
I'm sorry.
Kind of. Guess you didn't know.
But that was crazy to learn about. So.
Yeah, that's great.
And yeah, I think continuing the theme of wacky murder.
Real life murders.
I don't know about wacky murder. Although they did. So both the topics are
Fine.
very coincidentally similar in that they both are a murder that turned into some sort of culturally acceptable entertainment. Because my topic has recently been made into a Hulu original series.
What?
Even
We
though
can watch it on Hulu?
Yes, it's very dramatized and a little bit fictionalized, but not as much as you'd think watching it. So, the topic I have for us to talk about is the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the murder of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. So I'll give a little summary so we all know what's what, and then figure we'll go from there. I'm going to read it so I don't leave anything out. On June 14th of 2015, the body of Dee Dee Blanchard was found in her Greene County, Missouri home. She'd been stabbed to death in her bed. Her daughter, 19-year-old Gypsy Rose, was missing, yet her wheelchair was found in the bathroom of the house. Gypsy was wheelchair-bound, had a feeding tube, suffered with muscular dystrophy, leukemia, epilepsy, asthma, vision, hearing impairment, and many other chronic conditions that were largely attributed to a chromosomal defect, as well as being described by her mother as having the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. The two had moved to Missouri from Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. Habitat for Humanity had built them a new home with a custom wheelchair ramp in front, and the house was painted pink. Earlier that evening of June 15th, when she was found, a post had been made to the Facebook page that Dee Dee and her daughter shared, and used to keep in touch with many of their followers, supporters, and donors. The post simply read, "The bitch is dead," with an exclamation point. Followers of the page were concerned, and several of them contacted the police after not being able to reach Dee Dee. And then another post was made, which prompted them to basically get the police to come out and do a wellness check on her. Because another post was made that said, and this is a little graphic, but it read, "I fucking slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so fucking loud, LOL." So people went to the house to check on her. No one answered. Their car was in the driveway. And given that post especially, they were very adamant that the cops come out and do a wellness check on her, on the family.
Yeah.
Authorities traced the Facebook posts to a house in Wisconsin the next day. At that house, they found 25-year-old Nicholas Godejohn, as well as Gypsy Rose. She was unharmed, and to everyone's shock, she was walking, eating normally, and showed no signs of any of the chronic conditions she had been known to suffer from. Text messages, Facebook messages, and other digital communications revealed that Gypsy and Nick had plotted to kill her mother and free Gypsy from her imprisonment. Dee Dee, her mother, had a condition called Munchausen's by proxy. She had faked and falsified her daughter's illnesses from the time she was a young child. She forced her to use a wheelchair, convinced everyone, including Gypsy herself, that the illnesses were real. Dee Dee had controlled every aspect of her daughter's life. She kept her confined to a wheelchair, using a feeding tube she didn't need. regularly shaved her head and forced her to take unnecessary medications as well as undergo major surgeries, all of which were completely unnecessary. She'd even lied about her age, making Gypsy herself and everyone else think she was much younger than she was. Gypsy had tried to run away years before her mother was murdered. She'd run away with a man she'd met at a convention, but her mother found her within hours of discovering she was missing and brought her back to the house. Gypsy says that once she'd been brought back to the house by her mother, that he had smashed her laptop with a computer, threatened to do the same to her fingers if she ever did anything like that again, and then proceeded to, with handcuffs and a dog leash, tie her to the bed for days as a punishment. Gypsy also alleges that her mother would beat her with a wire hanger, slap her, withhold food if she did anything that her mother didn't like or in any way jeopardized the...
Slap her with food?
She would slap her and also withhold food.
And withhold food, okay.
Yeah, sorry, withhold.
With whole food?
No. Gypsy alleges that her mother would be physically abusive with her if she talked back or questioned anything that she said or did anything basically that against her wishes.
Yeah.
That she'd be physically abusive. In October of 2012, Gypsy met Nick through an online dating service. They began a romantic online relationship that lasted 2.5 years. This relationship involved role-playing and a lot of, BDSM fantasies. Gypsy maintains that she was not happy with a lot of the BDSM kind of themes of their relationship, but she went along with it to make Nick happy because she was very naive. This was her only romantic relationship. She had very little, interactions with people in her real life.
Right.
They attempted to create kind of this chance meeting between him and her mother at a movie theater, hoping that her mother would approve of him and allow them to date, but it went horribly wrong, and Dee Dee basically was like, I don't know who this creepy 25-year-old guy seeing a princess movie alone in the middle of the day is, but we're not talking to him. So that plan didn't work, and they argued that day about it, and Gypsy texted her boyfriend later that night saying that she was ready for Plan B, which was code for killing her mother, and asked him to kill her mother for her so that they could be together and live their dream, is how she worded it. They planned the details through the internet and text. Gypsy stole a knife and prepared gloves and duct tape. The details are pretty disturbing, and essentially on the night of June 14th, Gypsy let him into the house, gave him the tools that she'd collected and hid in the bathroom while he crept into her mother's bedroom and stabbed her over 17 times. She says her mother woke up during the attack and she could hear her mother calling out her name, but she didn't do anything about it. And afterwards they had sex in the house, and then Gypsy and Nick fled to a local hotel. They had some problems getting bus tickets, but later, a few days later, made their way to his parents' home, his mother and stepfather's home in Wisconsin. Once they were there, Gypsy made those posts to the Facebook page. She says she made them so that people would find her mother's body, since her mother had already been dead in the house for several days without anyone finding her. Gypsy later pled guilty to involvement in the murder of her mother. She was given only 10 years due to the conditions her mother had kept her in her whole life. Years later, only I think 2 years ago, Nicholas Godejohn was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Gypsy will be eligible for parole in 2024, and she'll be 32 years old when she's released. So that's kind of the gist, the quick outline.
That is crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah. And it really shocked everybody because her and her mom had been very out. Like, a lot of people helped them and gave donations to them, and they spoke at a lot of conferences and other things about people with, disabilities and leukemia and all of that. And so a lot of people knew them and knew what was, about Gypsy's illnesses and supported them, and everyone was really shocked when this all kind of came out.
You know,
Yeah.
considering, I'm not sure I can really blame Gypsy Rose.
Right? Right? And what else do you know? I mean, it must have been this weird situation when, you know, I mean, she didn't have a good grasp of what normal people's ethics or ethical response would be, so
Right.
and then she goes online and she finds this dude that also exists in the real world. She can verify he's also into creepy shit that doesn't make her happy. Like, I kind of feel for her because that must have been weird too, and
Yeah.
like, you're just kind of going along for the ride with these
Yeah.
really harsh people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then you take that, you internalize it, and you go stab them to death, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they had come up with different plans to try and get if her not away from her mother so that they could be together.
Yeah.
And she could be free of her mother. They had come up with 3 different plans that they called Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. And Plan A was the movie theater thing, which did not work. And that was kind of the one they'd hoped had worked, that her mom would just be like, oh, who's this nice young man at a theater? It's okay if you talk with him and date him and this, that, and the other. And then the other 2, I feel like they went about in the wrong order, but Plan B was to kill her mother so that she could be free of her. And they actually had a Plan C, which was that Gypsy would get pregnant. And so their reasoning was him being the father, her mother, she would have to allow him to be in her life.
I think they were greatly overestimating her mother's sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I was thinking, you know, maybe that would get her new examinations by doctors that maybe would find new things.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah. That's very possible. Yeah,
I'm getting shades of Misery here, the Stephen King book.
Definitely.
Yeah, holding someone captive and
threatening physical violence when they try and leave. You know, not only doing
creating
that, but,
disabilities.
Yeah, creating disabilities, actually performing physical violence with surgeries using the medical system. You know.
Yeah.
And feeding tube.
Yeah.
Yes. It's pretty horrifying. Like, Gypsy went through dozens of unnecessary surgeries, some of which were major surgeries. When she was younger, her mom convinced doctors that she had had a seizure and almost choked to death on her own saliva, and the doctors took her at her word and did a surgery to remove Gypsy's saliva glands.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and her mother claimed she had muscular dystrophy, so they did the test for that, which I'm not entirely sure what all it involves, but it's basically scraping muscle off of out of your thigh, and it's extremely painful. And she had that procedure done, and they didn't find anything out of the ordinary. And those are just 2 major examples of these things that her mother put her through just for attention and sympathy, and because of her Munchausen's by proxy.
You gotta wonder how, like, all of it kind of passed, you know, in the medical system, because there should have been some hallmarks of disease that weren't. I mean, I'm sure over time, you know, you had a situation where the total sum of all the problems was such to create the appearance of someone who actually had things like leukemia or muscular dystrophy or any of that, and maybe there was play acting on her part too, because you want.
I'm sure she was trained.
Well, yeah, you want your your parents' approval, you know, even in a situation like that. So, but it's
because it can always be worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so this begs the question, like, we have self-defense as a justification for killing that is other than murder, but is that specifically for situations that are in that moment? If I didn't kill this person, they would kill me? Because it seems like we should have something for situations like this where clearly she's tried to get out.
Right.
Yes. She tried to run away and was found immediately, brought back, punished very harshly. She tried to
and
this is a picture of Gypsy and her mother, Dee Dee.
Okay.
Yeah, she tried. She really, really tried to get away and just felt like she couldn't. And the thing with Munchausen's by proxy is she would never have been able to reason her way out.
Right.
Like,
Right.
her mom was bound to determine that she was sick and needed her mother's care, and everyone needed to know about it, and it was what it was. And very manipulative. Gypsy's father is actually alive and well and tried to be a part of her life. That's a very interesting story, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, so, let me find my notes. So Dee Dee's father met her mother when she was 24 and he was only 17. And they started dating, and she almost instantly got pregnant. And being from Louisiana and a very traditional family, her father, Rod, was like, well, we gotta get married now. There's nothing we can do about that. And they got married while he was still 17. And he says that he woke up on his 18th birthday and was like, what am I doing here? Like, I just turned 18. I'm married to a woman I don't really care for like that. And made a decision that he was going to leave her, but still wanted to be part of his daughter's life. And at least by his account, says that he always really, really tried. And Dee Dee had been a nurse's aide and had gone to some college, for medicine. And so when she would come back from a doctor's office and tell him his daughter was ill, he had no reason to not believe her. And she was, and besides her medical training, she was 7 years older than him.
Right.
So he had no reason not to trust that.
Right.
And-
And apparently she's controlling and manipulative, and that's not going to be just with her daughter.
No, her whole family. There's a documentary on HBO called "Mommy, Dead, and Dearest," and they have interviews with her family, and they do not like her. They never really did. Like, especially once they found out what she had been doing to Gypsy. But they were like, they even said, no, she was manipulative. She went to prison for 6 months when Gypsy was a baby for check fraud. She was like stealing her grandfather's checks and writing bad checks from his account. So her whole family is just like, no, she was manipulative and crazy. And part of the documentary is crazy, like insane. They got her ashes after the fact, and it's her I believe her father and stepmother talking about it, and they were like, yeah, we got the ashes back, and we asked her sister or somebody what we should do with them, and they said we should flush them down the toilet. And they were laughing about it, and it was like,
wow,
they didn't they 100% think Gypsy was justified and that it was self-defense. And I mean, but yeah, her dad tried to be in her life, and then her mom just kept distancing, and then once they moved out of Louisiana, they were just always, oh, something came up before his visit, or oh, she's napping, she can't talk to you on the phone. And so put distance between them. And her father feels horribly guilty for not doing more, but he didn't know.
Right.
Nobody
he didn't have
knew.
any reason to know.
Yeah.
Right.
Like any reason to suspect even.
That's
Wow.
Yeah, and this didn't happen that long ago. I mean, she was murdered in 2015, and I think Nick John's trial was like 2 years ago. But everyone I've talked to is like, what? Like, when did this happen? Like,
right, yeah.
People haven't heard about it, which is very strange. Until the Hulu show, I think.
Oh, yeah. So this is kind of a weird place to go, but I'm not so certain her boyfriend is justified.
right.
Like, there are some marks on this whole thing that make me really first, that he was doing BDSM stuff with her that she went along with, but wasn't necessarily cool with, you know, just as a kind of a supporting background thing.
That wasn't a known thing, like, to her. I'm sorry for interrupting your flow, but
no,
like, I would be interested in knowing who. Sorry, go ahead.
No, finish. You're good.
I think I just interrupted for no reason. I don't know.
Okay.
Like it just evaporated as soon as
I hate that.
I feel bad. I'm sorry.
So, but anyways, that is kind of background knowledge of the kind of relationship they were in, and then Plan B was to murder her mother, which I think is odd. And of course, stabbing her 17 times, but that could be panic. Like, oh crap, this is harder than I thought. Totally.
Right.
But the fact that they had sex in the house before they left, like, Rebecca told me once they've done some studies, and when it comes to like fictionalized representation, most men show some physical arousal at scenes of sexual violence, but sexual predators have physical arousal at scenes of just plain old violence, the
Right.
non-sexual variety. So the fact that he's like, hey baby, let's do it right here,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was her
Well,
idea, but it just kind of
no.
feels squicky to me.
Well,
There-
yeah.
okay,
it,
yeah.
It all fits a pattern, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing, okay, so that, there's other details where that's concerned. When I say there was disturbing details with the planning, so they had kind of been talking about this, obviously, as Plan B. Apparently during these conversations, he was like, yeah, I'll murder her. Okay, this is really convoluted and, like, complex. So he told her he had multiple personalities. And one of these was a 500-year-old vampire named Victor. And then there was another dark, like, personality. And so, basically, when she asked him to kill her mother, she was asking, I believe, Victor. And so it wasn't really him, it was Victor. But another weird detail is when they were planning the murder, he was like, yeah, I'll murder her, and he also wanted to rape her mother.
Ooh.
And she was not having it. She was like, no. And not cool. And basically, she says, had to make a deal with him, like, you don't get to do that to her, but you can do it to me if you'll murder her and not do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was kind of almost like a pre-set up, like, terms of their agreement, which is... when I first heard about it, I thought, well, he was just saving her. You know, he was trying to rescue the woman he loved so they could be together. And then hearing that kind of detail made me go, okay, maybe not.
Yeah, there was some
No,
other
yeah,
kind of
no.
gratification in there for him.
Yeah,
definitely.
I feel like part of it may have been for her, but I think she was like, would you murder my mom? He was like, yes.
Yeah, right.
I'm in it.
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm really into it. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's maybe
And
the...
Also, just think how awful her life was, that
Yeah.
that seemed like a better alternative.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think
Jeez.
she maybe didn't know any other way. I mean, after realizing that all of this was fake and her mom was using her for personal gain, she may not have really fully grasped how wrong it is.
And what other options did she have?
Go
She
to
didn't
the
know who to contact. She did
police.
not have an education.
Mhm.
All her experience with people in authority was medical settings, and those people were the ones hurting her and going along with her mother.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you would assume that any authority, cops included, would probably
Yeah.
go along with her, and then you'd get beaten or whatever on top of it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in knowing if he was pushing for the murder at any point too, because
Could you say that again?
if I would be interested in hearing if the boyfriend was pushing for the murder at any point in their conversations, because it strikes me that like Clara was saying, I'm ready for Plan B. Okay, I'm there.
Right, like,
it's just
did
so
he plant
quick.
this?
Well, and you got to wonder, like, even if she hadn't said it's go time, right? If he'd have just done it anyway after a point.
Yeah.
Because he had the location, he knew she was there, he bought into various narratives that would have allowed him to feel justified to an extent in doing it. And so it sounds like he was a time bomb anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ted.
No, I was gonna say, and I would not be surprised if she's like, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to get out of this, and he was like, well, you could always kill her.
Yeah, I'm not sure who brought it up first, but I know they had talked about it at length before.
Yeah. And then he
Okay.
may have been, well, what other way do you have to get out? Like, I don't see any other way. And he was the only person she knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just didn't really have anyone in her real life that she could kind of confide in, for real.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had a neighbor who she describes the neighbor's daughter as being really close, like a sister to her and stuff. But even that, it was still her keeping up the charade that her mother had put in place. Like, she couldn't tell a real live person.
Right.
that it was fake.
Yeah.
And
All right. Hold on for 1 second.
Yeah, that's extreme.
Mhm.
And yeah, thinly justified. I mean, but at least on the part of the perpetrator, the
Nicholas
Godejohn, on his part, it's like, yeah, go to the police, go to an authority and get them involved if you want better for this person.
Right.
You know, it's definitely an abusive pattern, because at that point, you know, he's not thinking about what's best for Gypsy Rose. Yeah, he's not thinking about what's best for Gypsy Rose. He's thinking about how he can best keep Gypsy Rose under his control. And so he was exercising control at first through the chats, and then later through actually following through and murdering her mom.
Yeah.
Dee Dee.
Yeah, during their chats, he said he had different personalities, and that he basically at some point told her that all of his personalities needed girlfriends, and so that she should make up her own personalities to kind of match them.
Wow.
And so he definitely
It's just how people work.
comes
right?
off as very manipulative, and he has never been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. He has been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, and there's a little bit of debate about, like, at his trial, the defense was like, he's, you know, basically second level 2 is what I'm trying to say. The defense was like, he's level 2, which means he doesn't have the mental ability really to deliberate. But the prosecution,
I don't know, he sounds pretty deliberate to me.
Yeah, and the prosecution had their own psychologist, Dr. Robert Denny, and he said no, he's level 1 and very well adjusted. Like, he gave an interview where he stated that he had taken a minute to really think about if he wanted to go through with it right before the murder. And so you can't really, you know,
Level 2. Then.
yeah, how can you say you can't deliberate if he not only really thought about it, but then they have hundreds of text messages about them talking about it.
Yeah.
And he'd been previously arrested. And so...
For what? Do you know?
Yes, he'd been previously arrested after he'd already met Gypsy and been talking to her online for a little while. He was arrested for disorderly conduct and carrying a concealed weapon. In March of 2013, when he was 23, he was arrested for allegedly masturbating at a McDonald's while watching pornography on a laptop. And when the police asked him why his hands were in his pants, he claimed he was just scratching. They found a concealed knife in his pocket, and that's why the concealed weapon charge. They later dropped that charge, and he pled guilty to disorderly conduct. He paid a fine and gave them the knife, but didn't serve any jail time or anything like that. And they don't think that's at all related to, you know, the eventual murder, but here's pictures of her other personalities, by the way, because I thought it was interesting. So they'd video chat, and then she'd have these other
Very strange
wigs and things that she would wear to compliment. So there's Ruby, who's like the one for Victor. So she described
She's
that
like a counterpart to a vampire.
Yeah, she described that alter ego as a half werewolf. Like, so, and then there's I think she called it Little Kitty, which is like her little girl kind of anime character personality, alter ego. They're not really personalities. Yeah. And then she had Candy, she describes as like the vixen, and so
unicorn vomit hair.
This is a picture of her now, and then this is her father, Rod, and his wife.
Are they supporting her at all?
Yes, they have actually started a petition to get her out of prison sooner. They say it was self-defense. She needed to get out from under her mother, and she did the only thing she thought she could do. She didn't think she could go to authorities because her mom told everybody she had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old.
Right.
So she thought, if I went to the cops, my mom's just going to say, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's disabled. And then you go right back into it. And apparently her mother had also had papers drafted to declare her incompetent. And so Gypsy didn't think she could get out of it even by going to the police. And so this was literally, she felt like her only option, and frankly may have been.
Yeah.
As horrible as that it feels to say, it may have been.
I can't see any other options for her.
No.
Once you get stuck into those systems, it's almost impossible to get out sometimes.
Yeah. And
how do you declare yourself mentally sound? How do you prove that to people who don't want to see it?
Right.
Yeah. And it... Yeah, I mean, she had to have felt super trapped. And I think it's very, very telling that now in prison, people ask her, like, well, is prison better? And she says, yeah, prison is better than living with my mother. Because her mother wouldn't let her walk, wouldn't let her eat food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't let her grow her own hair. Like, that's a level of imprisonment that is horrifying.
Yes.
And, you know, and at least now in prison, she can walk and talk and eat and...
She can be her own person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost unthinkable for me, like, that this was allowed to happen, you know, that someone would think this was a good idea. I wonder about Dee Dee's motivation. Like, I know she wasn't liked. I wonder if maybe this was... I mean, obviously it was part of her desire to manipulate others, to position herself in a way that was sympathetic, but even to do that, it seems to be taking it to such an insane degree,
right?
That
like
it's
being
hard to
a
fathom.
caretaker for a disabled person it's an incredibly difficult job to be in.
Yeah.
Like, to do that and have the work of creating this whole fiction in the first place, and it just seems crazy.
Yeah. Well, she suffered with Munchausen's by proxy. So Munchausen's is when you will either make or pretend that you are sick to get attention and sympathy and all of that, things that go along with that. Munchausen by proxy is when a caretaker makes someone else sick or makes up an illness about that person, usually someone who's elderly or a child or someone who genuinely is disabled, so that they look more sympathetic, so people can go, oh, you poor thing, you're taking such good care of them, that must be so hard, you're a saint, you're an angel, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And as far as how she was able to do this started when Gypsy was really young. I want to say like 5.
Okay.
And some things when a child is, you know, that young, they take the mother's word for it. So she would say she has sleep apnea. And the doctors would have no reason to not believe her.
Right.
She'd say she has seizures. The doctor has no reason not to believe her. And then as those kind of things progressed, the medications that Gypsy would be prescribed would have side effects that mimicked the diseases or illnesses that Dee Dee said that she had. So,
right.
Here, let me see. Oh. Okay, so this is a side-by-side of Gypsy as a child. And, well, not even that young. I want to say she was like 16, 19 in that picture. But here, let me skip over. That's Nicholas Godejohn before his arrest, and then him in court during his trial. So these are pictures of their house where her wheelchair was found, but that is her mother's medical closet.
Wow.
That's it, just full top to bottom of medications and
floor to ceiling.
Yes. And a lot of them were very potent, and Gypsy was on medications for epilepsy, which she did not need, that basically rotted her teeth out.
Ooh.
And then she needed them to pulled and to have dentures. And so a lot of the medications her mom convinced doctors she needed would then mimic the symptoms of other diseases, so it became easier for her to convince doctors. And then some of the stuff was just straight up a lie, and she would just tell them, oh, she has muscular dystrophy. Didn't need a doctor to sign off on that to get people to believe it. They see a girl in a wheelchair and her mom says she has muscular dystrophy, they have no reason not to believe that, you know.
Right.
And so, and it's crazy, like some of the stories when she was like, let me double. Yeah, it was. They got a house, money.
Yeah, I was noticing all these people in yellow helmets.
That's the Habitat for Humanity people giving them the house that they specifically built for them.
Right, because, of course, you know, as the master manipulator, you would have a house built by Habitat for Humanity.
Mm-hmm. I think their car was a donation as well.
So strange.
Yeah.
And horrible, but bizarre. Like, I wanna ingratiate myself with everyone off the bat. No, it's got to be like now, like, and to do that, I'm going to screw over this person's life permanently, and just
I still get the
all
feeling
the bad
that
things.
to someone with this disorder, their child isn't a person; they're an extension of themselves.
Right. I mean, obviously, she doesn't treat him as an individual. You know, it's like it's like, you are mine to do what I want with. It's a very entitled attitude. You know, it's disturbing.
Yeah. It definitely seems like her mother just wouldn't give her any choice in anything, and even, I mean, not letting her know her own age.
Yeah.
Like, I think at one point she said that her mom had told a doctor or something that her age was different than it was on her, like, Medicare card or something, and she'd snuck it in the night and found documentation that said she was born in 91 when her mom was saying she was really born in like 94, so she was really like 19, and her mom had convinced everyone, including her, that she was like 15. And
oh my gosh, that actually reminds me of a Flowers in the Attic. That author did all sorts of crazy stories like this back in the 90s, and there was a story she wrote in which the kid had some traumatic thing happen to her, and her parents just like rewound and convinced her that she was a younger child of the sibling this had or of the girl this had happened to, and like it didn't come out for years later. And I'm like, this would only happen in fiction, right?
It's intense, and like some of the stories are crazy too, because like when she was very young, I've heard it, but either she fell off her grandpa's motorcycle or they had a motorcycle accident. But it must not have been crazy, because by all accounts, she went to the hospital with a scraped knee.
Oh.
And came back with her mother saying she had muscular dystrophy and now had to be in a wheelchair. And
that's a pretty big
difference. Yeah. And Gypsy says the only thing she knew wasn't true was that she knew she could walk. And she would often walk in secret in the house, and anytime her mom would catch her, she'd yell at her or beat her or something. And if anyone else ever saw her walking or moving or anything like that, her mom would go, well, you know, the muscular dystrophy, she can, but it's getting worse, and she shouldn't, because it makes it worse faster.
Of course.
But Gypsy says she didn't know any of the things were fake, and it's really terrifying, because she also says that with the feeding tube, her mother could have been medicating her in her sleep.
Yeah.
And she never, or poisoning her. Oftentimes, people with Munchausen by proxy poison the person that they're caring for to, you know, mimic symptoms. Yes.
I mean, that's de facto what was happening with the medication she didn't need, you know. Most of those were having a poisonous effect, it sounds like.
It's true. And a lot of people with Munchausen by proxy do eventually kill the person that they're, you know, caring for.
Right.
And so I personally think that Gypsy planning her and carrying out something that ended in her mother's death was self-defense. At least
Absolutely.
on her part,
Yeah.
I think 100%. And I don't know that she should have gotten 10 years in prison.
You know,
But,
though,
I mean,
this I'm not sure on my logic here. I'm not even sure I should say this, but in some ways, giving her a structured place that's not with her mother in order to, I mean, prison would not be the best choice,
right.
but I think in a lot of ways it would be worse for her to just suddenly be on her own.
Yeah, I think some sort of mental care facility would have
Yeah.
been a better.
Or
And then,
her father's house.
right. And I think if they had instead sentenced her to some sort of mental care facility, then a doctor would have been able to be the one to say, okay, she's not a danger, she's ready to rejoin society, and
Right.
or join it real for in a real way for the first time.
Yeah.
I feel like despite the initial like trepidation she would have felt necessarily just being all this being determined by a doctor, she'd have gotten over it, you know. Yeah, it sucks that she's in prison when all this crap happened to her. It wasn't her fault.
Yeah. Well, she basically was in prison her whole life,
Yeah.
and had
Yeah.
her whole life really stolen from her in a real way. And
Including those extra years that her mother erased.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, like finding yourself 3 years older means you've lost 3 years, essentially.
Yeah, because you would think, oh, wait, I'm 14, and then suddenly, like, wait, I'm like 19.
Right?
Whoa,
Yeah.
Whoops. Like, what happened to that? And
Exactly.
it would have made it harder to process, I think, a lot of the natural feelings you have
Yeah.
being a teenager, and that must have
Yeah.
been so much more confusing.
Right.
And I can see why she would have latched on to
Anybody?
Yeah, anybody, especially anybody who is in a romantic type of relationship with
Yeah.
her. I can see why she would have been like, "Oh, you want me to have other personalities? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it takes to make you
It's-
happy. Okay."
It's still asking less than my mother does. But this whole thing kind of reminds me of this quote I don't remember well that I saw recently that was, this then is the power of a mother to not just define their child's reality, but to tell their child how they should interpret that reality.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that I have heard some people speculate. And I don't necessarily think that this is entirely true, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility either that she grew up with a mother who was a master manipulator. And if she realized there was no way out, could she have been manipulating Nicholas Godejohn into doing this? Like, found someone she thought she could get to do this. And then,
I mean,
kind of,
It's possible.
yeah.
It doesn't seem to fit the rest of the
No.
details of the story on an emotional level.
Right. Yeah. When I heard that, I was like, well, maybe, but I don't think so. I think what happened after their arrest may have been her falling back on patterns that she'd learned from her mother, but I don't know that she could have possibly had the social skills to plan something that detailed out. I'm gonna find a guy online I think may have a violent streak, and then online date him for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Until, like, that seems of a calculating nature that someone who didn't have
Not to
the
mention
social
whatever
skills.
side effects she was getting from her pills may not have allowed her to be that cognizant all the time or most of the time.
Which she says that during the actual murder, like, people will be like, how did you feel when you were in the other room and you heard your mom yelling out for you and yelling out for help? And she says, I was so drugged, it almost felt like it wasn't real. And
Wow.
I mean, I don't know how much of that is her just being like, I don't know, but it's very possible.
And it also, it is. Yeah, absolutely. And she could have been, it wasn't going to feel real anyway. Like, her life had in no way prepared her for a moment like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you learn to go away really far in your own head sometimes.
I don't think it really fits that she was manipulating Nicholas Godejohn from the jump. It strikes me as she probably lived a very lonely existence, not being able to express herself in uncensored ways in any way, like, that wasn't approved by her mother, and probably reached out being genuine and happened to hit this live wire in this guy who ended up doing this. But she had ample opportunity do it herself, as she was still a capable-ish person, having been in prison for that long, probably wouldn't be as capable as someone who had not been. When not drugged, she would have the element of surprise. She would be able to plan it very well.
She has an entire closet of drugs
exactly,
to choose
like,
from.
There's so many opportunities in that house just from the pictures there to do something about it. So I don't think. And then the fact that this guy wanted to rape Dee Dee, and like, obviously Gypsy Rose didn't let him.
Is that true? What I assume there was an autopsy. Was there any evidence of rape?
No, none whatsoever.
But she could be making it up. But
I think they had verified it on their online communications, that they have record of them, their video chats and texting and stuff, that had been a thing that they had talked about. But no, there wasn't any evidence of that having happened, and both of them say that it didn't. In his interview after their arrest, he was very forthcoming about what happened. That he told the investigators that his other personality, Victor, had committed the murder because Gypsy had asked him to, and that he was saving her from her mother, who,
it's not wrong,
done all of this stuff. And so, and they had asked him in the interview, there's video of the interview, and they asked him, did you do, did you do anything, of a sexual nature? They asked very specifically. And they even did your penis touch anywhere on her? And he's like, no. And they're like, what about after she was dead? And he's like, no. He's kind of disturbed by that. But
that's where he draws the line.
Apparently, yeah, that's the line. But he was very forthcoming during the interview about that, what had happened at least. And yeah, it's interesting because when they interviewed her, she acted very surprised. They were like, your mother's dead. And she was like, wait, what? Oh my God, what? And she says that, she didn't know her mom was dead, didn't know that Nick was going to kill her mom, and cried and insisted that she loved her mother. And then she later admitted to planning the murder and asking her boyfriend to kill her mother. But right at the jump, she was like, oh my God, I don't know what you're talking about. And I think that may have been her falling back on some of the things she had learned from her mother, you know?
Well, sort of, but poorly.
Well, yeah, they did not cover their tracks well.
But the other thing to remember, though, is that she had a forced learned helplessness.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just that she was falling back on being a manipulator like her mother was. It was more falling back into the role that she'd grown comfortable in. I don't know, I'm helpless, and I don't know anything, and I'm just a victim here. Because that is a very comfortable place to be, especially when you have been the victim the whole time.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I personally think that one of the reasons she didn't take it upon herself to kill her mother herself was she loved her mother. I think when she said that to investigators about loving her mother and her mother being her best friend, I don't think that was a lie. She had really only ever had her mother. And granted, that was because her mother kept people away from her, but
that doesn't matter.
Yeah, she would have cared about her despite wanting to escape. That's why I think their plan A was, let's get my mom to like you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
I was talking to my mother. I was talking to my mother recently about memories from when I was a small child, and I mean 3 or 4.
Oh, wow.
And I said, Mother, at that point, you had a body. I knew who you were. I knew you were a person. But mother or mommy went beyond that. And it was an amorphous cloud that was the whole world. And mom was only part of it. It's a weird memory. It's pre-verbal. But she would have been stuck in that place.
Right.
When you're a small child, your parents are omnipotent. There is nothing they don't know. There is nothing they can't do. They control every aspect of the world on an emotional level, if nothing else. And she was kept helpless forever. So how could she ever have grown out of that?
Yeah.
And how do you kill God?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really good, I think, way to look at it. Because her mother had essentially made herself that in her life. She didn't think there was anyone else she could turn to, or anyone else who could do anything for her. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a really pretty spot on analogy for
Well,
that.
thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Woo!
But
Alright, sorry. Got carried away there.
but yeah, it's just crazy. I'm really surprised that I had not heard about this, considering,
I haven't heard about this.
right?
Mm.
I was watching another YouTube channel of someone I liked, and someone had recommended the Hulu show to them.
You can mention who they are.
And can I?
If you, it's called a shout out. It's
Shout
very
out.
common.
Shout out
YouTube
Stephanie
thing.
Harlow. she
It's fine.
someone had suggested to her she watch it, and she was like, I'm gonna check it out.
You
And
should go check out her videos. They're really good.
she-
Should be a
she's-
link in the description when we're done, right?
Probably,
yeah, she's a really
Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
That's right.
no, she's a really good YouTuber. I really enjoy her content, and she really researches it really well and thoroughly. And so I had heard it mentioned on her channel, and then she had come back and been like, "Oh, I thought it was a documentary, but it's a dramatized, like fictional kind of show. So I want to do real research on it before I were to comment on the show." And so then I was like, "Okay, maybe I'll check out the show," not knowing what it was about at all. And I watched part of the first episode, and it was still very much, the facade. And I was like, I don't know if I like, and maybe not. But then I heard something more about what actually ended up happening, and then I was like, wait, what? And
What?
and so I kept watching it, and there's still episodes coming out. They're not all out yet, but it apparently is. Some of it's fictionalized. They obviously can't know the details of what happened in the house and things like that. But by all accounts, the series is pretty accurate. And having,
Well, I hope some of the money is going to Gypsy.
Right?
I would hope so too, because they're probably making a good amount off of her story.
Right.
And one thing I was really, really surprised about, so I had been watching the Hulu thing, and then when I went to research it to talk about it with you guys, I was like, okay, no, I need real hard, facts and things. So I watched interviews with Gypsy, and then I watched the interrogation of both her and Nicholas Godejohn. And the Hulu series, on some things like their interview, it's a straight up reenactment. Their inflection is almost the same. Their facial expressions, they really tried
That's
for
cool.
accuracy with things that they have on
that
video.
they have evidence, video evidence of.
Yes. And you can find the video of their original interviews, because it was 4 years ago. Almost his entire trial, if not his entire trial, is available on YouTube.
That is insane.
So you can go, and I watched some of the testimony. I watched Gypsy Rose's testimony at his trial. I listened to some of the psychologists talking about him, and one of them had done sessions with him before this, and the crime had even happened, and hearing his perspective, and then someone after, and there's a lot of stuff out there to find. But I was really surprised when I went to find a book that there is not one.
Wow.
I could not find a book about it at all. Nobody's written on it all.
That's really unusual that it went to a dramatization without being a book.
Yeah, there's apparently
Skipped a step.
a Lifetime movie based on it loosely from back in the day, like a few years ago. There's the Hulu series, and now Dr. Phil interviewed her in prison, and now he has a podcast all about it.
Well, it's good that it's
And
coming out, kind of, because,
Yeah.
I think I kind of agree with you, Tad. It sounds like we need, like, a definition of murder that is not immediate, that is something, or self-defense, rather, that it's like...
That is not just in this one exact second.
Exactly, yeah.
I was thinking about
I mean,
it.
so
and-
if you have a serial killer, let's totally made up scenario. You have a serial
Mhm.
killer who has killed like 5 women, and he captures one. I mean, this happens in the movies and TV all the time.
Mhm.
And the 6th woman, and he's got her like in the prison in his basement, and like the skeletons of the first 5 women, and she's like, "Oh, I can finally break free," and she like stabs him to death on her way out. If he had his back to her and was unarmed, can she claim self-defense? Because I think that's pretty clear that she can.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I
would
think
so.
legally she'd be able to claim self-defense. There was a impression that he was going to do imminent harm, right? I mean, I
Right.
think
Yeah.
you have to try and run away if you're being prevented from running away by the same person that you kill. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that if I had to argue it, I would definitely say that Gypsy acted in self-defense and Nicholas Godejohn was her weapon. Now, his motives and reasons for doing it may
Are
not
separate.
are a separate
Yeah.
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the legal thing would be. Like, I killed someone to save someone else, but there were.
I mean, there are some legal precedents, but usually in cases of like your children, like because in a lot of places it's self-defense, immediate defense of yourself or others. Like it's
Right.
still legal to shoot a complete stranger who's about to knife another complete stranger,
Right.
depending on where you are.
Right.
Yeah. But with the different circumstances about him obviously having his own motives and reasonings, and I feel like that
Kind of feels like Zimmerman, you know?
like a
like-
crime of opportunity kind of
Right.
thing.
Like, he was presented with this golden opportunity to do this thing and the perfect justification to just give it enough, like, you know.
Just to make it enough okay that he could go through with it.
Exactly. Like, it,
Yeah. Well, and during his trial, his defense team argues like, if not for her, then he never would have done this. But I wonder if this didn't just happen to be
would have been some other
someone who had violent tendencies and was looking for an outlet for those, and then you build up over
because
2
you
years of
can't
fantasy.
keep that chain
and-
forever anyway. Because like, what if once again with the serial killer, and you cut in front of somebody in traffic, and because of that he doesn't kill them, he kills someone else? Like, how far back do you take? If it weren't for this, the crime never would have happened.
Right. Yeah. And, yeah, and just the fact that he seems so stoked on it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's a
I
big
realize
difference.
this is total squickiness, but just the fact that there was a sexual factor to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
It raises the bar and makes the whole thing an entirely different thing.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. I agree. Learning that detail made me go, oh, like,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother thing. Like, it's hard to argue he's the chivalrous knight saving her life when
Right.
that was part of the equation at all.
Yes.
Well, and it was a no matter what, too, because it was either he raped Dee Dee and
She had to make a deal with
yeah,
him. Like,
exactly,
well, how about
like
me
Gypsy
instead?
Rose. Yeah.
Before he would apparently be super cool with it. And yeah, that.
You almost wonder if he was there like, yeah, I'm going to get to do this other thing. Like, hooray. And that was his real motivation the whole time.
I don't think so. They had sex before that. During the movie theater thing, apparently they'd had sex in the bathroom of the movie theater. So it wasn't like that had never happened or could never happen.
She's not even a
If
very...
not for this.
Not even a very...
you know?
Like, Dee Dee was not very good at keeping track of her despite her many conditions, right?
Well,
Yeah, that has crossed my mind. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think at that
Jeez.
point, they dramatized that bit in the Hulu show, but according to Gypsy, she was just like, I need to go to the bathroom. And when her mom knew she didn't really need help, and it probably wasn't an hour, so.
right, that's true. Probably didn't even last the whole song.
But yeah, so I mean, I think one had a lot more to do with the other. I don't think it was I'm excited about murder because if I do that, I get to do this other thing. I think they were very much an intertwined.
Yeah, I think he's just excited to do murder.
It seems
Yeah.
that way.
I mean, that's really, what it seemed like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she gets out in 2025.
24, I
24.
believe.
Wow.
And
We'll have
yeah.
flying cars by then. Flying Teslas.
That's only 5 years from now.
Flying Teslas.
Yes.
Yeah, 2024, she'll be eligible for parole. And at that time, she'll be 32. She was
Wow.
22 when this happened. And yeah, he was 25. at the time. But yeah,
He was 2 years younger than her?
older. He was like
Oh.
3 years older.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, by the time she gets out of prison, she could be 32. And yeah, her father has started an online petition at like change.org to try and get signatures to petition the governor to let her out sooner.
Under house arrest or something.
I don't think
Link in the
so,
description.
But yeah, like,
We're gonna have to do a lot of link searching after
I've got a
this.
bunch of links.
Good.
But yeah, so even if she serves her whole sentence, she'll still get out a fairly young woman and still have, it won't be like she's getting out of prison at 50. Like, she'll still have a good chunk of life, at least, to live free.
I mean...
And recently she said that she's gotten engaged to a man she started corresponding with after the Hulu show kind of made her story more public. Apparently
Really?
she started corresponding with somebody and now they're engaged.
Wow.
I don't know if that'll work out because they have met in person in the prison, but that's
Well, hopefully it's for the right reasons.
But prison marriages don't have a real great success rate.
No.
Well, and I mean, hopefully it's someone that has some insight into her situation, because like that's not going to be an easy transition, especially having lost so much of the time that you have, and not having much in the way of skills for productivity or things that are marketable that you can do even. Like,
yeah, she's been getting her GED in prison.
That's
but
good.
it's still a lot of catching up to do.
Well, that's the thing,
when she get out,
she's starting off at 32, going through high school now.
Yeah.
So she's going to be 36 when she gets out, presume. Well, no.
She'll be 32.
She's going through high school in jail anyway, but
yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just so much time.
I think
it'd be hard not to dwell for me personally.
Yeah. I think she said something about wanting to raise awareness after she gets out of prison about Munchausen by proxy and things like that, which I think would be
the best plan.
Really good, because it really is a serious issue, and I think it's more prevalent than people know it is, because oftentimes the person perpetrating it kills the person.
Right, and because if a mother comes in with a child in a wheelchair and says her child has muscular dystrophy, we don't have any reason to doubt it. Yep. And we shouldn't. I mean, that in itself is an ethical dilemma, because I tell you what, having to reprove your disability every 5 seconds gets freaking exhausting.
Yeah.
I bet. And just like, I don't know. I feel like doctors were in a position to catch some things, just asking basic questions, and then like probably glossed over it. Well, I don't need this hassle. If I start this fight with this lady, like, she's big, she might get violent. Like, this is gonna ruin my day. Well, potentially.
More than that, I think what a lot of times would happen is if they didn't believe her, she'd find another doctor.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And people with these sorts of manipulative disorders tend to be extremely charming.
Yes.
People want to go along with them.
Yeah.
People want to make them happy.
Right.
And I watched a video, I think I have a link to it somewhere, that's her father talking to somebody, and they're going through some of her medical records, and there was a doctor she saw at one point who made a note, like, mother is not a good historian, and even said, like, possible case of Munchausen by proxy. And I believe that doctor reported her, or like had someone come out and do like a wellness check, and she was basically like, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. And then they were like, oh, okay, can't really do anything about it.
Of course, the other thing to think about, though, is the people doing the wellness checks, they are trained to look for neglect and abuse. Mm-hmm. They're not trained to look for somebody who's doing everything right for all the disorders listed on the sheet, but the disorders aren't real.
Right. Yeah, they're not at all prepared to confirm Munchausen by proxy. Like, that's not even...
It's like a clinical diagnosis, almost.
I mean, they require almost totally different approaches mentally.
Right.
From the normal kinds of cases that wellness checks are going to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was just kind of, the system really failed her.
Okay.
And, yeah, her mom was just really good at moving and distancing her from people. And when she had a test that says she didn't have muscular dystrophy, they were just like, oh, cool, we're going to go to another doctor now.
Yeah.
And then they even moved states so that she was too far for her father to even see her. And
Well,
yeah,
and her other
And you know,
family.
updating your medical records is kind of optional. Like when you start with a new doctor, it is not automatic that they get records from
Right.
previous doctors.
Right.
You have to okay that. And they almost always will in complicated cases like this. But I think with my doctor, it took at least a few months for us to get
Yeah.
around to doing that, you know? That gives you quite a window.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and apparently a lot of things like her birth date on her Medicare card, I believe, her mom would go, "Oh no, that's wrong. It's a typo," or her records were lost in Hurricane Katrina, so we
Oh,
only have what I
that's-
have on hand, and so
Having
people.
a hurricane in the background makes stories like this a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then doctors would be like, "Oh no,
It sort of
that's terrible."
Makes everything
Yeah.
ambiguous. And then what I'm noticing is it's the same thing with the doctors as it is with her dad, with Gypsy Rose's dad, and then Dee Dee's family too. It's that like creating distance by whatever means necessary, presumably being a jerk, presumably like just finding a new doctor or
moving
like
a little further
creating-
away.
Yeah, and the Hurricane Katrina story, like, oh, you don't get to see these. It's all smoke and mirrors, and then
And
it's,
all designed to make her look good.
well, and sympathetic, very like
Yeah.
everything.
Like,
has
look at poor me and all this stuff that's happened
I've
to
been
me.
victimized so many times.
Well, and apparently, like, to hear her father tell it, like, he said he called on her 18th birthday to wish her a happy 18th birthday, and Dee Dee was like, "Don't tell her it's her 18th birthday," and he was like, "What do you mean, don't tell her it's her 18th? She doesn't know." And she was like, "The doctors say she doesn't have very long," and reminding her of how old she is and how much closer she is to death is just not right. And so she would.
Wow.
And what do you say to that? No,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to remind my daughter of her age and remind her that she only has a few more years to live. Like, it was literally so hardcore, like, emotional craziness, like, that people were like, oh, shit, okay, and went along with it, because what else can you do?
I think if anything, you were sick, like, an aside, because I'm not denying that was the case, but, like, if anything, you're sick like that, you celebrate those years. You're like, I made it to this year, right? Like,
Right.
fuck, I hope I get a few more. Like, I hope I can put more digits on this number.
Well, which makes me wonder, because according to her father, like, Dee Dee was like, oh, she may not live past, like, 19 or 20 or some low number like that, which she did, even before her mother died. And I'm wondering, how long could her mother have kept up that charade?
Right.
Even clicking back, dialing the clock back a few years, how
Right.
long can you convince people, oh, now she's totally lived, like, 5 years past when we thought? Like, at a point, would that have had an end game? Where it would have had to have been, now I'm getting sympathy because my daughter passed. And would she have had, that's just
Oh.
speculation, but
It was probably
how long
coming up.
how long can you keep that up?
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the question that probably, was in Gypsy Rose's mind. Like, how long can I keep going with this? How long will I last at this pace? And so it was very much like a time sensitive issue for her.
Yeah.
And so I mean, yeah, she could
Yeah.
have died. It's
Yeah, her life was threatened.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was increasingly so as the
She got
mystery
older.
started to unravel itself. This person has lived so long with all these diseases. Well,
Yeah.
eventually you live long enough, scientists are going to come around like, hey.
How are you 30 with childhood leukemia still,
Yeah.
with no real treatment?
We want
what?
to study you. Like,
Right.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was this a small town? Like, was it a very large town that they lived in?
No, it was, I mean, I don't know over much about the town, but it was Greene County in Missouri. And it doesn't seem like it was that big of a town.
But they moved quite a bit too, didn't they? You said.
Yeah, they had moved from Louisiana, and I think in
after
Louisiana they'd
Katrina.
moved some.
Right.
But a lot of people knew them and knew of their story and stuff like that. Like Habitat Humanity built them that house in Missouri, and the people in the community had built it. That's how Habitat for Humanity works.
It's just like the hiding in plain sight thing, I guess. Like,
very, very much so.
When everyone thinks they know the story, then they are going to kind of ignore or explain away discrepancies.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Confirmation bias. Oh, it can't be. It can't be because we already know, they're sick. It's nothing. It has something to do with that, no doubt. Like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's trippy. And I'm really surprised nobody's written a book and that this isn't more well known. And it took a Hulu series for it to really be brought into the spotlight more. And the series, by the way, is very, I feel like they were respectful of the subject matter. Oddly, Dee Dee's family, who, don't particularly care for her in general, but I've seen some interviews, well, I haven't seen the interviews, but I've seen quotes from them, from interviews, that say basically the only thing they were really upset about the series with was that they portray Dee Dee as being sick, or near, around, closer to when she gets murdered, that she was sick, and they're like, no, she wasn't sick. She was fully functional and knew what she was doing the whole time. She was never sick, like they portray.
Wow.
And they were upset that they tried to almost make her more sympathetic.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, she was a manipulative monster. Like, that's not how that was.
Well, okay, so my question is, if they knew this whole time, then why were they not trying to get between her and Gypsy? And
I was wondering that earlier, and I was thinking, like, she must have been the most horrible person to them. Like,
they didn't know that she was faking Gypsy's illnesses.
Right.
They knew she was very manipulative and things like that, but I think they may have seen that more as her getting things. Like, oh, now you get a car, now you get a house. But I don't, they genuinely did not
realize
know.
that Gypsy was healthy.
No, they did not. They did not at all.
Well, they
according to them.
My guess is, like, they were being a little bit petty and, like, didn't involve themselves because this lady was hard to be around, because she was so manipulative. And
I'm
like,
sure she pushed them away once she stared faking Gypsy's illnesses anyway.
Well,
that's what her father says, is that it was more and more distance, both literal, like moving further and further away, and emotional, like, oh, you can't really talk to her on the phone right now, and apparently telling Gypsy things about her father. She says one of the reasons she didn't go to her father for help, because when they ask her, why didn't you go to your father for help, and she's like, my mother said that my father left us and didn't love me and didn't want me. Why would I go to a man I thought wouldn't care
of
what
course
was
she would say
happening
that.
to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always question when someone talks about other people's motivations like they know, like.
And so she legitimately didn't think he was there for her. And now they have a relationship, and she understands that wasn't true, and he's apologized to her, and she's like, it wasn't your fault, and that kind of thing. And so he says that once she gets out of prison, she can live with him, and they want that. So
good.
But yeah, there's definitely been a wedge kind of there.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I'm really surprised about it not being more talked about. Especially, I feel like even 2015, true crime things were more in the media, and people were more hearing about these kinds of cases, and you have things like Making a Murderer, where people are getting involved and trying to do what they think is right and affect change with these kind of things. And I'm really surprised that something this crazy.
It was
sensational.
Yeah.
It was a year before an election year. I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Could be.
Because the media spin cycle was like,
maybe
it started
got
early.
Lost in the But and one thing that's really crazy is you can still go to Facebook and look up their page, and the bitch is dead post is still there.
Oh, wow.
The other one that's more graphic is not. The page has been, I guess you can make Facebook pages like a memorial page. So it's that, and you can't like or comment on it, but it's there, and you can read it and share it, and you can read the comments of people panicking and trying to figure out what's going on.
Oh wow.
It's still up, and they're leaving it up, and that's pretty. It's very strange.
Yeah,
To be
it
like,
is.
what? Like, this is. Holy crap.
Should have grabbed a
Yeah.
picture of that.
I know, I didn't have time, but
Oh,
it's
no worries.
But if anybody wants to look it up, it's
Link is in the description.
yeah,
I don't
and you
know.
can go to Facebook and you just look up, search for D, like DEE, Gyp, GYP, and then Blanchard with an E at the end. So BLANCHARDE, and so D Gyp Blanchard, and then it pops it right up, and it's their page that they shared, and
Wow. You just get D in and it autofills. The
I
rest.
Oh, wow.
feel like a lot of people are looking this up. This is what you mean. Yeah, and it's trippy. Like, if you're really, really interested, you can go back and look through the comments, because at first people are like, what? Are you guys watching a movie? What's going on? And then people are like, did your account get hacked? Like, what is this? And then people start to get panicked, like, has anyone heard from them? And people are like, I'm calling, and they're not answering. And then
Oh, wow.
eventually people are like, I'm at their house, and nobody's, here. And it's trippy to read the comments, because you can kind of
Yeah.
see it happening when people are checking and trying to figure it out. And that now the cops are going to do a wellness check, and they had to get a search warrant before they could actually go in.
Oh.
So it took a minute, but yeah, the whole thing is just a really
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad she's out of there, at least, and
Yeah.
not sick, and
Yeah,
has a few
apparently
years.
she has no. I saw an interview where they asked her, so were any of these real? Do you actually have any medical conditions? And she's like, I have kind of a little bit of a lazy eye, and you can't even tell. So it's like,
Wow.
she's totally fine, like 100% fine. And
It's crazy that she came through it still okay, health
yes,
wise.
she
Yeah.
lost a bunch of teeth, and she says she still has like a scar from the muscular dystrophy test and a few other things like that. But yeah, it's surprising with like looking at that medicine filled closet.
Right?
It's insane that she didn't have more lasting damage than losing teeth and a few scars from
could
medical
probably
procedures.
springboard that into a whole conversation about, poisons being available in mass quantities like that to poisoners. But
Well, you know how to do it apparently. But
well,
yeah, you just get
the other
medicines.
thing is to remember is that there's no way you're ever going to keep poisons in mass amounts out of the hands of poisoners.
I have a bunch of links and stuff, so we can put information in the description about the HBO documentary. It is the only documentary I could find too.
The HBO documentary or Hulu documentary?
The HBO has a documentary.
Hulu has
Oh,
a
okay.
TV show.
Hulu
has the dramatization.
Yeah.
Yes, but the HBO documentary was the only one I could find.
Wow.
So there's surprising. I was surprised that there weren't more documentaries and there wasn't a book so.
Yeah.
But ironically, YouTube was the place I found the most information, just because they have the interview videos and they have the trial videos. You can see a video of her pleading guilty,
Wow.
and taking the plea agreement for the 10 years and stuff like that. But I have links to that stuff, so we can put those in the description. Dr. Phil just started a podcast about it. I've listened to the first episode, and it is, I'm going to use the word melodramatic. It is
Okay.
definitely being played up for to elicit an emotion. It's not, if you're looking for a documentary style podcast, the Dr. Phil podcast Analysis of Murder is not that cut and dry documentary podcast. It is very
Okay.
much, if you
Good
want
to know.
an emotional retelling with some psychological, psychology analysis thrown in, then yeah.
So I guess thus concludes the first issue of the Odd Times. Interesting topics and random opinions, and I am reading that. That's okay.
It's all very new.
Because it's odd.
It is.
It's the odd times.